All right, everyone. Looks like the time is upon us. We are going to kick off in just a second. Justin, if you don't mind, if you can start the recording.
Looks like we're already started.
All right, perfect. Let's go then. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the presentation today. Today, we're going to be chatting about key elements of success for engaging student volunteers. I am trying to change the slide. I'm one of your hosts. I am Darren Liddell with the Taxpayer Opportunity Network and Prosperity Now. And I'm really excited to tell you all a little bit about what we're going to cover today. We'll get to an agenda, but with me behind the scenes on the ones and twos, if you will, is my colleague, Justin Chu, Program Manager, Ecosystem Change. Yep. So yeah, with that, we're going to dive in, y'all. So a few housekeeping things. Just remember that this webinar is recorded and the recording will be shared after the presentation. You all should be muted already, but if you're not, please make sure you mute yourself so that we can maintain the best sound quality. If you've got any questions, you can either ask a question or drop feedback for us in the chat, and we'll go from there. And if you have technical issues, of course, you can email us or reach out to Justin or myself. All right, so only the panelists will be muted on this call. We're actually not going to have folks will be able to engage with us via chat, so we'll move on. We're looking forward to this being an engaging conversation. There'll be a chance for you all to ask questions of the panelists. There'll be a chance for you to talk about some of your experience and some of your best practices. But today we're going to cover welcome introductions, give an introduction to who's speaking with us. We'll talk about a project that we recently launched and concluded, and continue, and we'll share some of the best practices from that, as well as we'll highlight topics from reaching student populations, anticipating volunteer drop-off, tips for working with students virtually, as well as advice for VITA programs to keep in mind while working with students. And then we'll close it out. So today's speakers, so I'm just gonna highlight everyone and then I'll kick it over to Rebecca to do a bit of an intro. So Rebecca Thompson is the Interim Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Prosperity Now. If you're involved in the TON listserv or TON at all, you know Rebecca well. And she continues to empower us and has moved into a new role where she's doing even more to impact the community. Yeah, Rebecca, would you actually like to jump in and continue with the intros?
Certainly. I'm happy to do so. So excited to have Steve Balsam joining us, who's a professor of accounting and senior MERS research fellow at Temple University. Sasha Hollister. Hi, Sasha. It's so great to see everybody's face. Assistant Director, Community Relations and Place-Based Engagement at the University of Richmond. And we have Kara Cardati. Yeah, Director of Tax Assistance Programs at United Way of Greater Richmond and Petersburg. And Roland Tate, who's the Senior Tax Analyst with IRS Spec. I'm so excited and delighted to have you all join us today. All right, and moving on, yay. Again, really excited for this opportunity to be here to share with you today. I do just want to start with a brief welcome again to today's webinar. Of course, as per the norm, we are so excited and delighted to have you join us, and we're excited about the opportunity to share what we hope will prove to be valuable information and insights to inform your volunteer recruitment and management practices, particularly with regard to student volunteers. So my role here today is to provide a little bit of background and to lay the foundation for today's discussion. Earlier this year, the Taxpayer Opportunity Network convened a student volunteer engagement task force for the purpose of leveraging the experience and expertise of college and university professors and staff to gain an understanding of the most effective strategies and processes for engaging students with the VITA program. We know that over the course of the years, many of you have tried, many successfully and several unsuccessfully, in really engaging student volunteers with your VITA program. And so we thought to convene the experts and some folks on the college campuses to garner their experience and expertise to help us figure out how we might crack this nut a little bit better. So the ultimate goal of this project is to increase the number of young adults ages 18 to 24 who can prepare tax returns and support others in their communities by equipping the local programs with helpful tools and resources for engaging student volunteers. And I would also add that we are also training and cultivating a new cadre of tax filers, and so providing essential life lessons and benefits and information that will support them, the students, that is, throughout their lives as well. So this group was comprised of representatives who are college university professors, campus VITA program managers, and the IRS. And let me pause for a moment, because I would be remiss if I did not offer thanks and thank our sponsor, Annie E. Casey Foundation, for their support of not only this work, but the Taxpayer Opportunity Network broadly, and then also for their keen interest in lifting the financial well-being of young adults ages 18 to 24. So thank you again to Annie E. Casey Foundation. All right, so with that, I want to share the highlights of some of the key elements of success that were identified by the task force, and you probably can nod your head and maybe drop in the chat or something as you agree with some of the things that that our task force, some of the elements of success that the task force identified. First off, it's really important to manage your expectations. Really important for someone like me who tends to think big sky, reach for the moon. It's really important that you manage your expectations. Particularly for a new program, that you're going to start small, but don't expect to stay small. So your expectations should change as your program evolves. Second thing is really important is around having a strong support network. This could be both on campus and off campus. The third element of success was utilizing the talent that you have on campus. We talked a lot about not having tunnel vision, but broadening your perspective of where you might be able to find talent to support your program on campus as well. A volunteer experience is great. As a volunteer experience, it's also a little bit better when it's offered as a 4-credit course or as a part of a 4-credit course. I have students in my home who always enjoy getting credit or paid for their contributions, even to the household. So similarly, when we think about college students, offering credit also helps. Training is intense. It is intensive, as I'm sure everyone on this call already knows. I mean, when you're thinking about a college and a campus program, get help. You don't have to do it all by yourself. So make sure that you find partners in your support network who can help you with training. As a VITA program manager, and definitely as VITA volunteers, it's always important that we keep our focus on the volunteers and the experience that we are creating for them. That means that volunteer management, all of your normal volunteer management practices come into play when dealing and engaging with students on campus, but also even more so because you have to be a little bit more creative when you're dealing with this particular audience. And so you have to be creative in the way that you focus on the volunteer and make sure that you're maximizing their experience. And alongside that, it's always helpful to have clearly defined volunteer roles. Make sure everybody knows which seat on the bus they're supposed to be in and where the bus is going. And as long as everybody is operating from the same set of standards and ideas about the volunteer roles, then that clarity definitely helps your program to operate and run smoothly. So those are the highlights. I invite you to dive into the resource that we provided, and perhaps we can put the link in the chat so that you can dive into it a little bit more. And with that, I am going to yield the conversation back over to the panel discussion for some discussion to dive into a little bit deeper into some of And thank you all again, Stephen, Kara, Sasha, Roland, Darren, thank you all. And as well, thank you so much, Justin. Let me go ahead and acknowledge the rest of the Student Volunteer Engagement Task Force members who so graciously, lent their time, their talent to this resource. So thank you all again. And I'll turn it back over to you, Darren.
Perfect. Thanks, Rebecca. All right. So thanks again, everybody. For those that were part of the task force, we can't say enough how much we appreciate you. And for the panelists, I'd love to kick it off with a question to you all to just hear a bit about, I'd love to hear a snapshot of your VITA program and how you encourage students to participate in VITA this past tax season. And maybe Steve or Sasha, would either one of you mind kicking us off?
I can kick you off. So last tax season, of course, was unusual. It was our first fully COVID tax season, and we operated virtually. And a big shout out to getyourrefund.org, who provided most of our clients. Without them, we wouldn't have had a site. And actually, our program, a little background, I've been running the program at Temple for 15 years, or this will be the 15th year. And it started off with 14 students. You know, at various times I've topped out at over 50 students. And, you know, I do presentations, I send out emails, I have a huge poster in the hallway. But I think mostly I get new volunteers word of mouth. So the prior volunteers had a good experience, and they tell their friends. And I think it's just, you know, it's like a business even. Word of mouth is your best advertising, and it works for clients too. So, you know, last year was no different. You know, I did have a fewer volunteers without a doubt. And I do believe the experience was not as fulfilling as it is in person. The camaraderie wasn't there. But, you know, based on, you know, the word of mouth from prior volunteers who did enjoy it, I get new volunteers every year.
So I'll add a little bit of history of University of Richmond's program. This will be my 4th tax season running our program with the Bonner Center for Civic Engagement here, but the university's 11th year, and it's started as a part of a course, it was corporate tax class, and it was a required class for all accounting majors, and that's where we had our peak, like 75 students involved. And now it's an independent study, and it used to be just for business school students, and now we've opened it up this year for the first time for any student. There's no prerequisite, and we have 2 sections of the course. We call it VITA 1 for first timers, and our VITA 2 for returning students. That gives them the opportunity to, these are both course credit, they both offer credits. Those students participate as quality reviewers, which are very needed in the program. I'm always looking for quality reviewers to help just move things along on site. So I would say that having the opportunity to come back is a great way to encourage students to participate. Word of mouth is very important. And this year, what I created, like we had a flyer and a summary that went out to our advising center, so that like the weeks ahead of the enrollment date, the advisors would have that with them as students were deciding what classes to take, to build up sort of word of mouth, since this is our first time opening it up to all students. And we've engaged with a lot of disciplines over the years. So for example, it was for the WILL program, which is a social justice and gender studies program, that the VITA program was a service learning option for that program. Also, our Jepson Jepson School of Leadership Studies, their Justice and Civil Society course. VITA was an option. Our Spanish in the Community course, there was an option to work as translators at a VITA site, and then also outside of like tax preparation as greeter screeners.
Perfect. Thanks, Sasha. So we've heard so far from two university staff who work with students. I'd love to hear from Kara and Roland about your experience, how you work with students. Maybe Kara next, and then Roland.
Great, thanks, Darren. Hi, everybody. I'm Kara Cardati. I'm a program director at university. Sasha, I'm stealing your university there. United Way of Greater Richmond in Petersburg, in Virginia. Partnered with University of Richmond and Sasha for a number of years. We have 15 sites, partners that work within our coalition. We're lucky enough to have VITA partnerships with 2 universities, which means we work with students, although in different ways. Sasha highlighted the great partnership that we have there with our other universities or programs that we kind of target as well. The partnerships look a little different. So we gather students in different ways, not related to course credit, but I think it really helps our program to have that connection with universities in different ways. Being flexible as a program director and always maintaining great contact in terms of expectations really helps because our service footprint is pretty large, so that we have partners coming in from different localities to help serve our program overall.
Awesome. Thanks, Kara.
Thank you. Okay, this is Roland Tate. I am in our the IRS Stakeholder Partnership Education Communication in our National Partnership Office, and we have 4 prongs, I say, that we work with students. One with, in no particular order, but the White House Initiative on HBCUs, that's one of our national partners, and we partner with the Department of Education to coordinate that particular program. VITA Alpha Psi, we have a national relationship with them, and they're headquartered in Durham, North Carolina. We have a internal initiative for high schools, and that ran out of one of our Texas locations, where we are coordinating throughout the country high school students, preparing them to participate in the VITA program. And then there are several colleges and universities that participate in the VITA program. It's, as you've heard previously, colleges and university, they are natural. There's students there. They have business majors, access to computers. A lot of the students do have jobs, and students, that's one of those groups that we're targeting in the VITA program. So just working with students is just a natural fit of what we do in our headquarters office. And that's what I just stop right there for now.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Roland. So we've heard from a few different panelists working with students on campus, working with HBCUs, working with students in their community. And a few folks highlighted ways that they encourage students to participate, but do you all feel like there's a golden nugget, one thing you'd want the audience to know about engaging student volunteers? And if so, what is that? What's that one thing?
I'll start this one since I finished the other one. One of the things we do is we tell the students that learning to prepare tax returns is a life skill lesson. We don't have any grades to give them. We cannot do anything for the classes. But when we have that opportunity to speak directly to the students, mainly we go through the coordinators, but when those students do talk to us, or we go and we have in workshops, and we'll say, well, at this age, 19, 20, you may have a small job and you're getting someone to prepare that return for you. But if you learn this skill, you can prepare your own return, and then you can take that skill back and you can assist those in your immediate family. So we sell it as some type of life skill that would help them in the future.
Thanks, Roland. Anybody else want to contribute?
I want to just follow up on Roland, what he was saying about the life skill. I also pitch it as, building up the resume. For our accounting students, they get to put two things on their resume. One is IRS certification. The other is community service, which, from what I understand, recruiters look for. But actually, what I tell them in terms of life skills is that, you will learn how to do your own tax return. If you want to use a system to prepare your friends or your family's tax returns, that's fine too. But I actually tell them that the more important skill that they're going to learn is get some experience with working with people, working one-on-one with clients of all shapes and sizes, from all facets of the community, people who they would not meet in the ordinary course of their day, which students normally interact with other students. So I do sell it as a life skill, but I think from my perspective, I always sell it as more as you get to improve your people skills, which it's kind of blasphemy for an accounting professor to say, but I think it's actually more important than learning how to do a tax return.
I'll build on that. I absolutely agree with both Roland and Stephen. And for the students who aren't accounting students but still interested, how I hook them is that that one-on-one, in the community, it's an opportunity to get to know a lot of different people. And you don't have to know everything about taxes. You don't have to know a thing once you come to our course. We will give you the tools and we'll help you understand the guidebooks, the software that will give you that power to prepare taxes. And I like to share stories about those moments that are really wonderful, where there's high fives and they're celebrating a really great refund. Helps them to envision the personal side of it past the taxes, which might seem daunting.
That's great. So y'all, Kara, do you have anything, or do you want to move on to the next topic?
I mean, you can jump to the next thing. I'll just add one thing. When I'm working with students, letting them know that it's a great opportunity for now, may be beneficial if they're receiving course credit, but it could really come back, further in their career. They could have the opportunity to connect through their next job. I had the opportunity today to do a visit with our campaign staff to one of our corporate partners and talk about the VITA program for some accountants and CPAs. And somebody was great enough to speak up and say that they were connected to the VITA program in college when they were in community college. So I thought it was so perfect for today, but it really does allow them to see that it's something that can be continual, that they can do later in life and still make a big impact. So they may have a purpose for doing it now, maybe course credit, but they really can see that it could continue as they get into their professional field.
Yeah.
Hey, Darren, can I add one more thing? Also, this introduction to the IRS, I guess it's strange to become an IRS person, but when the students, the younger you are and you have that connection with the IRS, you understand that, hey, it's not so bad if you get a notice. We were talking about that before the call. And when the students can get introduced to this agency and understand, because when you're at the VITA site, someone did mention that people are going to bring notice, they're going to bring letters. And as a student, if you see what the letter says, and it's basically saying, call someone, you left something off on your tax return, and when it's not their information, they are able to take a step back to read it. And then maybe in a year or 2 or 5 years, if they should get a notice, then it just won't cause a lot of angst, because they have been introduced to dealing with the IRS. So those type things, I think, really, really, it would be helpful to them, as we all said, as they get older.
No, that's I feel like I can relate to much of this. I can take like a little facilitator or liberty here and say, so when I first started with VITA, my first experience was as a student. So I'm young and plucky at the University of Georgia, and my professor says, you get 2 options. You can write a 25-page paper or learn to do taxes and volunteer with VITA. So everyone in the class basically became a VITA volunteer. And then from there, you know, it's obviously I'm here today talking about VITA, but at the same time, you're able to support your family and community and like learn and kind of share the knowledge and learnings that you get with those folks, and you know, empower folks to get their taxes done through VITA and otherwise, and hopefully for free. So with that, let's transition to the next topic. And this is a meaty one. It's a juicy one. It's one that I feel like is very popular, and something that VITA sites are often thinking of is student volunteer drop-off. So I'd love to hear from the panelists thinking about how you manage the students that you work with, anticipating the downtimes for students such as finals and possibly midterms. How do you anticipate those downturns? How do you incentivize participation possibly during those downturns? Love to hear from you all what you do and what you can share with the field.
Well, I'd like to mention a couple of things. First of all, from what I've heard from other VITA sites that are not university-based, volunteer drop-off is not unique to students. That's number one. Number two, at my site, since it is a college site, so for the most part, you know, volunteers are always continually in their first year. So they're rookies, they're raw, they're on, you know, they don't have much practice behind them. So when they start off at the beginning of the semester, I team them up. So 2 of them do a return, 2 of them do each return. So they work in teams and pairs. And then there's a separate quality reviewer, of course. And as they get more experience, they're able to work on their own. So it sort of balances out the volunteer drop-off. I can keep preparing the same number of returns with fewer volunteers. And then one more thing I'd just like to mention, if you do have the opportunity to get them in a course or to create a course around VITA, that controls for the volunteer drop-off, or it avoids it. So I have a, you know, 2-tier or 2-type population. I have those that are purely volunteering, and those who are taking it for course credit and getting a grade. The ones who are volunteering, they do drop off. By the end of the semester, you know, a quarter of them are still showing up, perhaps. But the students who are taking it for credit, attendance is almost 100% throughout, because their grade depends on attendance. So those are my 3 points, if you will.
I'll talk a little about our site. So I run a VITA site downtown, away from our university, and there are, as Kara mentioned, 15 VITA sites just like ours across the region. So students in our course or students that sign up to volunteer can, we provide transportation to any one of the sites. So they can choose one that sort of matches their schedule better, makes it, you know, easy for them to try different shifts. And it means that they don't always come to my site. I have community volunteers, I have volunteers from another university. And when I first started, the hour requirement was so low for the students that a lot of them would just try and knock it out at the beginning of the semester, or wait to the end, which meant in the middle, you know, it was iffy, or I was always retraining students. And as Stephen does shadowing in pairs when they first start, just to help them gain that confidence and that familiarity. It always meant that service was a little slow if I had, new volunteers. So now we built it into the course, the amount of hours they have to do, half before the spring break and half after, to help with that coverage, not just at my VITA site, but wherever they're volunteering, since it is a challenge if they're just trying to get it all done and do a couple 5-hour shifts somewhere. And then, like I said, transportation, food, on-site snacks, pizzas that they can grab, just helps in keeping them at the site or coming to my site, which, because I would love for all of the students to come volunteer with me.
That's great. Thanks, Sasha. Go ahead, Ron.
Yes, I think managing as Rebecca said, managing the expectation. When you're working with students, there are things, finals, spring break, whatever activities. If you go, let's say, to a Duke where there's a strong basketball program, when you set the site up, you may not be able to have it open every Saturday or every Wednesday. We're right now with HBCUs, we're trying to schedule some type of tax event with them virtually. But we got to realize that students are in class during the day, so we're scheduling it at 4 p.m. in the evening. So it boils down to volume. If you can get volunteers or the students from a department, so you always have coverage, that's one thing. But if you limit it in your participation, then I would suggest looking at some type of some statistical data and see, hey, how many returns we've done in the past, when are these built-in breaks, when are finals, and those built-in breaks, those finals, spring break, then you may want to, if not close the site, limit the site, or even go to some type of virtual program option where the students don't have to be there, or there would not have to be as many students there. So I would say just try to manage the site.
Thanks, Roland. We've got a few questions coming in. So if it's all right, I'm going to go, we'll go on and shift to our very first Q&A. So for folks that haven't, so we've got a few questions in here already. We're going to do our best to answer some of those. And then for folks that haven't been, feel free to drop any questions that you have for the panelists in the question box. So first question comes from, the first question is actually a bit of a comment, comes from Mary Fletcher, but she's got some follow-up questions. So she says she's found that students go to class and then they go to work and they have little time for volunteering. Those that can volunteer say they don't have time for training. And she's found that sometimes it takes more time than it's worth. But at the same time, Mary had a few questions for you all around student requirements and the number of hours you require students to volunteer. So would anyone mind chiming in around what you require students to do hours-wise over the course of the semester, or how you set it up?
At one point, and Roland can comment on this, at one point I saw IRS guidance or guidelines that suggested that volunteers, attend 50% of the sessions. So for volunteers, that's what I require. And sort of like Sasha finds, some of them, they get their 5 weeks out of the way and then they stop coming, which sort of accounts or leads to a lot of the drop-offs. So for the volunteers, I require, 5 weeks. And for the people taking it for credit, I require, attendance every week, all 10 weeks.
For my university, the VITA site I run, we operate 8 weeks. 1 week we are closed, so it's over 9 weeks. We don't operate over spring break. We require the students in the course and volunteers, like student volunteers, 20 hours, and they must do half before spring break, half after spring break. Did I answer? Did I miss anything?
No, I think you got it. I'd love to hear from Kara too. Kara, as a VITA partner that works with students from Richmond, University of Richmond, how do you all bake students into your VITA sites and work with sites to have them anticipate, student loads and whatnot?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think so, and Mary, to add to your question, we've also seen some similar successes and not so much of a success when we've worked with students at different universities. We've done a full training for about 15 or 20 students where it was only connected to receiving extra credit. So it was just part of one class. So they got different levels of extra credit however far they did. So if they came to training, they got a little bit of credit. If they did the certification, they got more. And then if they came on site, they got more credit. So I think students at that time were just happy and satisfied with getting a small amount of credit, which didn't help the program, help us at the program level. And so it turned out we may have done, a training for 15 to 20 individuals and really didn't see a return on that investment. So it's just been, it's interesting just to be really clear with what we're hoping to expect in terms of volunteer commitment at our site and making them realize the importance of showing up on site and how that can benefit the program. We have a couple of different pockets of universities that we work with, and they all do different things and they have different requirements. So for me at the program level is just trying to compartmentalize, the different requirements for the programs, and then just making sure that we're, following all of those expectations and that our site coordinators know as well. Because what we do as part of our program, as Sasha mentioned, having students go to other sites within our coalition, not just at the university site where they would be maybe their home base. So we have a mixture of community volunteers and student volunteers on site, and I think that works really well on both regards. The students are super sharp, they may be learning, they can really benefit from more experienced community volunteers that can help them feel more comfortable on site, and I think the benefit to both sides is very high.
Great. All right. Well, cool. So I have a few rapid fire questions for you all. Maybe one person can answer these so we can move on to the next section. There's a question around when you have hours for students to volunteer. Is it evenings? Is it weekends? Is it midday? Someone mind chiming in around how you make availability match student schedules?
Yeah, I originally started the program and it was based on the availability of the campus and space on the campus and space in the parking lot. So I've always had the program on Saturdays, which doesn't work for some students. Either they don't want to do Saturday or they have a job on Saturday. But it was, my decision was based on campus and parking lot availability.
Cool.
I'll just jump in real quick. Tuesdays, Thursdays, 3 to 7 p.m. and then 5 Saturdays to match up when students are most available.
That's great. All right, next question is, do students, I think I know the answer to this, but are students serving mostly students or are they serving mostly community members or a good mix of both?
Well, since you know the answer, Darren, what do you think?
I think they're serving mostly community members with a few students trickled in.
I would say it's pretty balanced, to be honest. Since we're working on a college campus, we do get a lot of students. So, maybe it's a third college students, but, a disproportionate amount of their classmates, let's put it that way.
That's great. And I feel like you do your classmates' taxes wrong, they will remember. So I'm sure it incentivizes folks to make sure they get that QR.
Well,
perfect.
The funniest thing I have about that is a kid doing his roommate's return. And I don't know if you have a nickname, Darren, but you got he's your roommate, you put in the name you call him by. IRS rejects it because that's not his legal name.
That's great.
Typing in Steve instead of Steven. The IRS will reject that.
That's great. Yeah, we're all learning here, right? All right, perfect. So I'll do one or two more questions and then we'll move on. Carrie asked a question to me actually and said, what class was it that gave me my life-changing choice? So actually I had two classes where I did taxes in college, Carrie. The first was Introduction to Financial Planning. So I was a financial planning major. And the second was tax planning. So you typically got certified in Introduction to Financial Planning, and then you had to do the taxes and volunteer as a student in the tax planning class. And then you could come back a second year if you wanted and volunteer again. And I did, and I feel like it was really beneficial because as you all know, you learn a little bit the first year, you get familiar with the software. The second year, you feel like a boss and you're helping out students, and you can really like take a bit more of a leadership role. All right. So with that, y'all, please keep the questions coming. We're gonna go ahead and move on with the agenda and get to our next question, which focuses on tips for working with students virtually. So as all of us know, these last 2 years of taxes and tax preparation have been very unique. So I'd love to hear from the panelists, any guidance, any best practices, anything that you have done or discovered in your last 2 years of doing taxes virtually. Carrie mentioned that he worked with Get Your Refund and it really helped them to connect with clients. But does anyone have any other things to share with the field for working with students virtually, tips?
Well, we just want to make sure that the security of the virtual process, we encourage the schools not to take any shortcuts. It's this information is with this electronic, this fast, this highway, and people are just using all types of methods. Just because you're using it does not mean it's right. So we just want to make sure that if they're going to go in this virtual platform, social media is not the way to transmit or to transmit W-2s or tax documents. We just make sure that we want the students to understand the severity of this, because what they're doing now with social media, it's just almost just second nature to them. But that's our focus, is whatever you do, please understand the security issues or the implication when you're using a virtual platform.
That's great. Good point, Roland. I feel like a very IRS answer is, of course, keep in mind security. No, that's a joke, y'all. Security is really, really paramount for all of us, and making sure that we're keeping our client information secure and transmitting it, and making sure that students also understand that security is important makes a lot of sense. Other panelists, any other feedback?
I can share some of my experience. Kara ran and still will run the virtual operations through Get Your Refund and using DocuSign for that virtual tax preparation. And we did that fully last year and a little bit the year before, mid-season, like at the very end of the season. And what I learned is we meet together on Zoom at the beginning of the shift. That's an opportunity to check in, do some training points, because there's always something to talk about, remind them of the security elements, and just to check in. Then cameras go off, so there's not that pressure to be on. While we assign in students, it makes it easier for them to jump in, ask questions. And then we have the use of breakout rooms for, as we mentioned, in person, we do shadowing or peer-to-peer. Still can do that virtually for the students if they're uncomfortable or it's a tax situation they're not familiar with. Well, let's go to a breakout room and we could do this together, or you could do it with another student. It still offers that same benefit. We provide very detailed scripts for them, because doing an intake and a quality review virtually is very different from doing it in person. In person, that person's sitting in front of you for half an hour to an hour. There's a lot of natural opportunities to ask questions as you go along. And the pressure on the phone call virtually is to make sure you cover everything, so you're not constantly bothering your taxpayer with questions. And so having a script that breaks down, a lot of the different questions they may ask helps them prepare for that. And security, I think at the end of every session, whenever you can, remind students to delete any documents that they may have saved on their computer. I think that's just something you just have to continuously emphasize, since it's so important and security is more challenging in the virtual sphere. And then the last note I would say is our training. We did fully virtual training, and it's hard to be on Zoom for long periods of time. So, Kara built in a lot of like quizzes, and there was an asynchronous part of the training too, so that not all of it, just to reduce the amount of time that was needed for over Zoom.
That's great. So y'all, we'll go on actually. There's I've heard a few questions, and I'm mostly trying to hold questions until we get to the questions part. But someone asked a question around, are students using campus internet, and is that secure?
I have to hope it is. I'm relying on it. I mean, one of the, last year when we were remote and students were in their own apartments, dorm rooms, houses, you have very little control. I have to hope, our tech people are not perfect, but they provide a higher level of assurance than students whose it's not their specialty. So I'm going to say I hope.
Yeah, very fair. Cool. There's another question going back a little bit around the age requirement for student volunteering, and the person asked, does student volunteer need to be at least 18?
I think Rollin.
Yeah, Rollin.
Yeah, there aren't any age requirements for student volunteers. We just ask the coordinators to stress the importance of confidentiality, and those coordinators have to make that decision if a student, when I say student, I'm talking about the younger ones now, if they are mature enough to handle this. And secondly, would an adult bring their tax return to that student? In our high school programs, I have seen those in the past. I haven't seen them lately. We would have students in a cluster, and someone would screen and make sure that these are your basic, simple returns. And you would have that coach, that mentor walking around, and it almost became data entry with the intake sheet. You can follow information, but even with that, the taxpayer has to be comfortable if someone is preparing their return. So to answer your question, that is not an age requirement right now, but not saying that couldn't happen in the past, in the future.
Thanks, Rollin. I also did previously have done work in Florida, and I know the Florida Prosperity Partnership typically is bringing in both high school students that are doing taxes, and sometimes students as young as middle school who are starting to help with intake and things like that. So all that to say, you all can get creative, and it's never too early to get those students involved and get them helping out at VITA sites.
Yeah, I will tell you that I have had middle school and high school students as greeters. But they were relatives, either of mine or another volunteer's.
That's great. Yeah, folks love a young greeter. I feel like it'll do a lot to calm nerves in what can be a tense environment at times. All right, perfect. So with that, y'all, I'd love to transition to our last topic for today, and then we'll go kind of get those last few questions answered. And this topic is really, it's a general topic around advice for sites that are trying to work with students, maybe for the first time, maybe not. but I would like to actually ask a specific question that came in from the chat and was something that I was hoping that we could cover is for programs that offer either paid internships or work study or a way for students to be paid. Do you all offer paid opportunities? Do you mind saying a few words about them, what they are, how you find the right students for them?
Well, up until now, I've never had a paid employee. I'm trying to hire an administrative assistant paid now, but I've taken the volunteer part of VITA seriously. So everybody's been volunteers. But I do try to give back to them to try and make it worth their while. And when I do recruit, when I do advertise, when I do have my poster, it does talk about networking opportunities, scholarship opportunities. As you guys know, this is swag. This is a polo shirt that I give all my volunteers, some of whom rip it off as soon as they're done with their session. But I try and make it fun. We have a reception banquet at the end of the year. I try and make it fun, and I try and make it worth their whiles. And I think that applies to students and non-students alike. I value them and let them know that.
And I do work with one or two students through federal work study, and I've worked through students with students who have not paid, but the Bonner Scholar Program, thought I would shout that out as well. But my federal work study students have worked with me year round. This just gives me the benefit to ensure that they're with me long term. So for example, my one student coordinator, he's been with me for 3 years. So each year, I can count on his level of knowledge and experience with the program than if I just rehired every year. It does make it a little challenging because I don't have as much VITA work in the off season, but what he does to support the program and my other student coordinator who has worked for me is help set up, clean up, answer calls, emails, help with like marketing materials, and as needed on-site greeter screener. They can fit into any role to quality reviewer. They've been a really fantastic help.
That's great. I'd love to hear from Kara and Rollin about recognizing volunteers. Maybe it's writing a letter recommendation, maybe it's being a reference for things. You mentioned resume building opportunities before, Rollin. Any tips or guidance on that, or maybe speak to how often you are doing that? And yeah, I'd love to hear from you all in that regard.
Okay, you want to hear from us with that?
Yeah, if you can.
Okay. Yes, we recognize our VITA Alpha Psi. I'll talk about them. They have they had an annual conference before COVID, and the IRS, we were on the agenda on the plenary every, I guess that second day, and we would present each certain chapters with particular awards. We would take about 10 minutes or so to make those presentations during that session, and there would be about 1,000 students there, chapters and advisors, and just packed. And those chapters that are being recognized, we would ask them to stand, and they would get the ovation. And then we would have a workshop, maybe an hour or so, somewhere during that day. So we every year we do recognize chapters. Now we don't necessarily recognize the students from our national level, but for those chapters, we do recognize chapters every year with a certificate or a plaque.
Awesome. I'll add, we don't have any paid internships, although, as Sasha mentioned, our organization also benefits from working with the Bonner Center, which is wonderful. It's a multi-year placement with an organization. So it's wonderful to build upon the knowledge that they would have related to VITA, which opens up the tasks that they would be able to do. With our other universities, we've been potential internship placements that the school or university has as part of their requirements towards graduation. So in those instances, we've had students that have come to our program that have had to do about 135 hours in about a semester time period, which really makes it wonderful for the site that we can connect them to, because that's a lot of hours to give to VITA, which makes it really valuable. In terms of serving as a reference, I've been in my program director position for about 7 years, and I would say it's close to about once every year that I serve as a reference for someone. So it is frequently that I get asked. I always tell students when I work with Sasha students on training, it is a great thing to put on your resume, and I'm more than happy, especially if they work with me directly or one of my sites that I spend a lot of time at. I'm more than happy to serve as a reference, and that's happened quite a few times.
All right, perfect. Thanks for sharing that experience, Kara. I wanted to share out a best practice from Kerry Gladstone that he shared with us, and he said, a best practice from Southern New Hampshire University, the on-campus VITA site is structured as an undergraduate class. Classroom training is on intake process, QR, interviewing with the rest of the return prep. The professor is able to move the course from elective to a required undergraduate course in the accounting program. The prerequisite is a taxation course, and for which the final exam is the advanced VITA test, which is great. Thanks for sharing that, Carrie. All right, also we're getting close to the end here. So folks have been dropping questions in the chat. I think we've gotten to the majority of questions, but I just want to highlight a few things as we look to close out the conversation. First, I wanted to thank the panelists so much for participating and sharing their expertise, as well as thank the members of the Student Engagement Task Force who helped to elevate resources and share best practices with us in the project over this last year. As we typically do at Prosperity Now, I just want to highlight that we continue to advocate for VITA and increased VITA funding and expanded VITA service. So as we think about advocacy opportunities, as we get towards the end of the student webinar, and advocating for maybe more funds to VITA funds so you can bring on more volunteers, or maybe it could be advocating with other organizations to give you matching funds. Just want to highlight that the Prosperity Now Advocacy Center is here, and always a resource that's available to you all to use, to partner with Prosperity Now on. You can use that to take direct action and inform and reach out to legislators. Please don't hesitate to reach out there, as well as take advantage of the link here. And I want to talk about next steps and close us out for the day. So Rebecca chatted earlier about the key elements of success for student volunteer engagement resource that is available and that Justin dropped in the chat earlier. You all please feel free to follow that resource. I think it's got some great tips for VITA sites to keep in mind as they're thinking about working with students. I've mentioned our advocacy center, as well as look out for advocacy prompts from Prosperity Now. Post this meeting, there will be a survey that's sent out, as well as always is the case, join the tax roundtable listserv to keep an eye and an ear close to what's happening in the field of VITA, and to hear from some folks who dropped in comments from the call, the panelists that were on the call. This is really a chance for you to stay close to what's going on and hear up-to-date changes and concerns, and kind of get ahead of them with the rest of the field. All right, and with that, we've got about 60 seconds left. I just want to thank everyone again for coming out today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Darren.
Thanks, Darren, and all of our volunteers and all of our panelists.
Thank you.